Okay.
Yes.
So thank you everybody for joining. We want to be as prompt as we possibly can because there's a lot to discuss. This meeting is about the topic of the national campaign called Our Climate Moment. And the national campaign is really designed to look at the unique opportunity we have at the federal level with temporary control of all three chambers to really pass some forward-looking, detailed climate legislation. But as a chapter, we feel that our climate moment is really about what this opportunity right now that we're living in today represents for us, because we've already had the hottest June on record with temperatures higher than 2 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. So a whopping destroyed the target for the month of June. And we know we're in our third heat dome experience here in the Western US. The public is focused like never before on the fact that climate change is right here, right now. And that presents a unique opportunity. In the state of Colorado, we're up to about 72% of people believing that climate change is real. It's us, and we can do something about it. So that's an opportunity we want to capitalize on now. Spend a little less time on climate deniers. They're really falling out of favor. They just don't carry a lot of credibility anymore. And basically look at beyond your personal choices to buy less things that are plastic coated, to compost and recycle, to maybe get an EV or solar panels. We want to look at what you can do in your neighborhood, in your city, at the state, and at the federal level. So with that being our introduction, let's move on to sustainable neighborhoods. And we're going to talk about what a sustainable neighborhood is, how to find out if you're in one, whether your city even has a program, and if not, how to get one started. And we're going to kick off with Greater Park Hill neighborhood. Tracey Macdermott's going to talk about her work in that neighborhood area. And then Theron Makley, our guest speaker for tonight, is going to also discuss some additional sustainable neighborhood plans. Then we'll throw it open to questions. Take it away, Tracey.
Sure. Thanks, Jan. And just real quick, I wanted to make a quick introduction also. Jo Rondon is on our call this evening. She is our new Vice Chair of Regenerative Agriculture. So please just everybody send her a warm welcome. We're happy to have her on this team. So I failed to mention that in the beginning, along with messing up Ivana's name. So I'm going for broke tonight on everything. So sustainable neighborhoods. If you live in a sustainable neighborhood in your city, if you don't mind putting that in the chat, that would be helpful just to know. And the Sustainable Neighborhood Program came out of a group of folks in Lakewood who put together this idea of, how do we work within our own communities to make where we live, more sustainable, put in projects that can help get your community involved and work on things that actually matter right here in where you land your feet every day. So we had gotten involved, 5, 6, 7 years ago. We've been involved ever since with Greater Park Hill. Part of it includes, we have a food program that goes out to needy neighbors. We get leftover food from the farmers market that is dropped off. That is a free farm stand on Monday mornings, so that food does not get wasted. And at last resort, it does get composted. We have worked with the city on different plans in conjunction with other neighborhoods who are part of the program. I'm trying to think of all the stuff we do, but what's great about the Sustainable Neighborhood Program is that anybody in your neighborhood, they don't have to be part of your RNO, which is your registered neighborhood organization. They can come to you with an idea and start implementing it, and you can gather points through that to achieve a status of an outstanding neighborhood, which Greater Park Hill happens to be. But it allows people to use their own creativity, their resources, and their talent to put things together and teach their fellow neighbors about what works and what is good in their neighborhood. For example, in Greater Park Hill, we've really been working on and have worked on, because we had a flooding issue here back in 2015. We had a pretty big flood, a lot of property damage, is just educating people about concrete and how that is causing that runoff, and how you can convert your yards, get some of that impermeable space out, getting it back to permeable. And also in those projects, trying to teach people on, what does stormwater runoff mean? And even though we live in Denver, Colorado, that storm runoff affects the Gulf of Mexico. And getting people together to talk about these things and really start thinking about it is where these amazing ideas come out that projects come up with. There's several of the neighborhoods got composting going for their groups. Gardening, garden in the box, we do every single spring, where people just can be a very small plotting of something, but they have something to plant some fresh food. So it's an exciting thing to get involved with. It makes changes right where you live in your neighborhood. And we have done project after project after project, and it's been a fabulous experience. And if you're not part of one, I'd be happy to chat with any of you on how to make that happen and connect you with the right people. So Jan, I think we can step into the next part of this.
Yeah, so just a repeat, if you're interested in creating a sustainable neighborhood where you live with your neighbors, drop your name in the chat and Tracey can look you up on the membership list. And Theron, you live in a different part of Denver. Do you have any experience to add about the Sustainable Neighborhood Program?
Yeah, I've been on the Mayor's Advisory Council for about 4 years, and Taylor Mullers runs that program out of the Climate Office. They've got new funding now, and they should be expanding that so you can actually get city backing in there. And Tracey, I know you did it one time. I don't know if you're still part of that program.
We are.
Denver has an official program, and one of the committees is really pushing that program to expand it and get some of the $40 million per year that's coming in into that program, because it's been such a successful program.
Yeah, and
Wheatridge just became a sustainable neighborhood supporting city last year. And so we have very few neighborhoods that have yet joined the program in Wheatridge. However, the sustainability manager for the city of Wheatridge is tasked with helping to bring on board new sustainable neighborhoods. So if you have any interest, you can reach out to your city's sustainability coordinator, and they will help you stand up your own neighborhood group and figure out what your goals are and find your neighbors, reach out to them, sell them on the benefits of the program. So it really is a way both to educate and help drive action at your local neighborhood level, and get to know your neighbors better.
And if you live in Denver, another great thing is with the passage of 2A, the climate bill that was on this ballot the last year, there is money available to get creative with. And for example, I am meeting with folks where we are looking to put solar on top of our neighborhood organization that will be done by folks who have been job trained in this, who have come from, they are looking for a new place to land, and it helps our disadvantaged neighbors get job training in a field that could really help them out financially also. So it's more than just putting solar on our building. It's helping those who need a hand up or a change in their job scope. So it's if you can get creative and work with some people, we're looking at expanding it all the way down the block with other businesses. I just got to get a few people to jump on and we'll see. But there is some dollars available with maybe some of these projects you might be thinking about.
So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand using the more function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you are a part of a sustainable neighborhood and want to provide your experience, we would love to hear from chapter members about that before we move on and talk about city level work.
Yep.
Anybody got anything? Okay, I'm going to move on to moving up the ladder one rung, and let's look at the existing corporate example of 100% committed. Oh, and there we go, which is our city level climate commitments plan. And we have several people who are going to talk about that effort. So first of all, we have a lot of new members that have been trained fairly recently by Climate Reality, and we want to give you a program description and have a discussion. And then we'll move into how has Denver really made the commitment to address climate change, and then look at a much smaller community, the community of Gold Hill, and Kat Russell will talk about her experience. So Tracey, can you provide an overview, please?
Sure. So the 100% committed campaign through Climate Reality is really, it says it all in just the title, 100% committed to 100% renewable electricity for your home, your town, your city, the state you live in across the US. And the goal here is to really work to get businesses, your city governments to start making this switch, school districts, whatever it is that are big players out there, to make their buildings 100 out of 100% renewable electricity. And at a state level, we've been trying to work with some different ideas, our committee, and we've really kind of landed, which I think Kat is really going to be able to speak to here in just a minute, is really working within your community and getting these 100% communities to make the switch and have it come from a neighbor to neighbor approach, but not losing sight on big commitments from industry, businesses coming to our state and our local governments to make that commitment and make it happen, not just say yes, but do it. So I am always available to answer questions on 100% committed. And if any of you want to work on 100% committed, we do work with the other chapters here in the state. So that's Eagle, Boulder, and my goodness, I'm going to forget somebody, Fort Collins, Northern Colorado. And there's also a potential for a new Colorado Springs chapter as well, but we want to work together with the other chapters so that we pool our resources and really create a push to make this happen. And again, just shoot me in the chat if you want to talk about this or get more involved. We'd love to have you.
And I'm going to stop my screen share now so that Theron can share some slides from Resilient Denver, which was the community-led organization that has really driven Denver to take the most substantial steps to positively impact climate change. Here you go, Theron.
Thanks, Jan. See if I can pull this off. Are you guys seeing my screen yet?
Yep.
Is it in presentation mode yet?
No.
This is where I have some problems sometimes. How about now?
Well, it looks
Nope.
like it's there, but it's small.
Sort of.
We see your
Yeah.
slides at the bottom of the screen now.
Yeah.
You could try the use slideshow, perhaps.
Let me, I have two screens open here is the problem. Let's see, how do I get to the other one? Let me flip over and share the other screen.
That looks better.
How's that?
Better.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Just better? All right.
Yeah, I mean, how big can you get it?
That is
No.
presentation
Good.
mode.
No,
Right.
that's good.
So Resilient Denver started back in 2018, but there's a lot of history before that. So I kind of want to back up a little bit all the way to 2004 and talk about what is going on to get us to where Resilient Denver started. Then I'll tell you more about Resilient Denver. So this is really detailed. I'm not going to get into all these details, but I have links in here for you to read more about these if you want. For those of you that are very interested, we'll send this presentation out afterwards, and you can click on any of these underlined links and it'll give you more detail. But Colorado started on its path to more renewables back in 2004. And I always want to bring this up because Excel takes a lot of credit for saying, you know, they're the ones leading us to renewable energy. And really the voters did it back in 2004 when they passed the RPS. So that's really what got us there. The utilities were against it back then. The utilities still delay us today.
Can I interrupt you for just a second, Theron, to say RPS stands for Renewable Portfolio Standard.
That's correct. And I'm assuming this group has a lot of education in that area. So keep interjecting if I assume too much. But it really took Denver quite a few years to get on board. And it wasn't until 2013 where Denver really got serious about sustainability and hired a sustainability director and really put him on the national spotlight. That person was Jerry Tiniano, and he immediately said we need to do a climate adaptation plan because we're going to have to figure out how to live with climate change as well as stop it. So a lot of good things went on back in that time frame. A lot of good plans were made, but as the groups I was in and other people were in were observing what was going on, we realized that carbon wasn't really being reduced, and these plans weren't really coming to fruition for lack of dollars, lack of awareness, and a lot of political action that was preventing it. So in 2015, an 80 by 50 plan was written, and it kind of sat for almost 3 years with not a lot of action, but a lot of words. A lot of people were touting it. The mayor ran on the platform, but the really thing that changed it was when the IPCC came out in 2018 and gave a strict goal of reducing emissions by 50% by 2030. Well, in parallel, we had been working with other groups. We Resilient Denver, before Resilient Denver, it was called Wind and Solar Denver. And prior to that, it was called Fossil Fuel Free Denver. It goes back all the way to 2009 when a few individuals recognized that the city may not move down this path quickly enough. So when the IPCC mandate came out, a lot of these different groups got together and went to a city councilman, Jolan Clark, and said, hey, what can we do to really put some teeth into our climate plan and start moving towards this 50% by 2030? So he got us all together, and that's when we formed Resilient Denver. And from the experience we had, we knew that legislation and funding were going to be the only ways to get this to move. And it was probably going to be done by the voters because we didn't see the will in the city government. So we created this a climate funding initiative that was really going to be a tax on both your electric and your natural gas bill. And we really raised a fervor with that. We really got a lot of good attention on things and really found out who was with us and who wasn't with us to move forward. Fast forward to where that ended up is finally the mayor's office agreed to meet with us, and we went through a series of monthly meetings with them and with city council, and that culminated in them asking us to pull our ballot initiative in exchange for a governmental task force that included citizens to determine what should really be done with climate action in Denver. And that's all the way down to the third block from the bottom there. The Climate Action Task Force met right when COVID started. So it was the first 6 months last year in 2020, and really got some teeth into what Denver needed to do and published a report. That has really kicked things off because it also, an agreement of that task force was that the city needed to get funding. And the best way to get funding was to use a sales tax initiative and bring that to voters and generate dollars to fund all these actions that they needed. And so at the beginning of this year, a new Sustainability Advisory Council was formed, And I'll talk in more detail about that and also about this tax during my presentation today. So that's the overall timeline. And Resilient Denver has been trudging along since 2018 to really be the eyes and ears out there that are making sure the city does what it commits to and really keeping the citizens together to make sure we're joined together in a common language and common push and not looking like a lot of different uncoordinated initiatives. So here's a little background in what was going on. So this is 2005 emissions in the blue and 2019 emissions in the green. And the city was thinking they were doing so well in reducing emissions. And in reality, they reduced by about 20% over that entire time period, which wasn't going to be on a fast enough trajectory going forward to meet that 50% by 2030. So I guess my point to this slide is just to show you that you really got to look into what the real numbers are and make sure the wool's not being pulled over your eyes, because our whole city was thinking that Denver was doing such a great job because we had all these plans. But in reality, we weren't doing what was necessary to move forward.
Sorry to interject again, Theron. I just want to make the point to our audience that if your community, if your city has developed a climate action plan, don't assume that the work is done or that they're on target to meet that plan or that they don't need citizen oversight, because throughout the last 10 years, the citizens of Denver have made sure that the city of Denver does what it commits to do.
That's correct. Great point, Jan. This next slide just shows how the emissions are divided up. And it's amazing how much this varies from city to city. So I would encourage you to make sure your city has a greenhouse gas inventory. And there's plenty of places they can find out how to do that. It takes a lot of time to get it more and more accurate. But this is some surprising numbers to a typical person coming into this, that really our buildings are almost 65% of our emissions in Denver, and transportation is about half that in the next highest one. So it helps you to focus where your efforts should be and where the biggest change is going to have to happen. So this, I think, aligns more with the climate reality project and where you guys are heading. Your new program is trying to get to 100% electricity. Denver committed in 2018, after a lot of pressure on the mayor, that he would meet 100% renewable electricity by 2030 for the entire community and by 2025 for all city municipal buildings. And right away, we saw that he wasn't going to be able to do that. And even to today, because of pushback from Xcel Energy, Denver's really on a path to 80% by 2030, even though we have this commitment to 100%. And this slide kind of shows the gap that's going to still be there in 2030 if we don't make some changes. So our group now is focusing on this gap and really pushing the city to say, hey, you got to do something else. You can't rely on Xcel for this. What are you going to do to get that extra 20% to meet the commitment you made?
Hey, Theron, may I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What if individual homeowners make up that gap? Is that possible?
Yes. So there's
Okay.
a few different things. It gets really complicated because of the RECs, renewable energy credits, and the way Xcel works those. If a homeowner would give those to Xcel, then it would go into Xcel meeting their 80%. If the homeowner keeps those or is able to give those to the city, then the city could do that. Right now, we found out just recently, though, that the city is going to give all of its RECs to Xcel to help them meet the 80% plan. And we have a group that's speaking out against that right now. So yeah, it's, I'm sorry I don't have all good news here, but there are a lot of good things happening too. But it just shows you really have to keep your eye on things, and that for as much great reputation Xcel has in being a leader, they're not going as far as they should be, and they're protecting their profits over the planet.
Yep.
So a lot of reports get generated. This is a lot of progress that was made between these two reports. So this is the 2015 80 by 50 report that was updated in 2018. And that's where we really got the mayor to commit to these emission reduction, these 100% plans. That came out at that time frame because they knew they couldn't meet the 80% if they didn't have a cleaner grid. And then on the right is the new task force recommendations, which has not officially been adopted by the city. And what's another fight we're having is saying the mayor needs to sign that, make that into a real action plan, and not just leave it as a citizen recommendations, because we all know what happens with recommendations. This is another area where you really have to watch what a city's doing. This is the mayor's recent budget and what he said he's spending on climate investments, $71 million. When we went through this and really peeled it back, really there's only about 8 to 13 million that's really affecting carbon emissions. Pretty much anything that touches a tree or an electric vehicle, he takes credit for in his budget. And so we're really trying to pull this apart and see where this money, where the real money is and what's going on there. Fortunately, there's this extra 40 million coming on that's really going to increase these numbers and make a big difference. But I just wanted to make a point that the what you see from a public official may not be the real truth in there. I'm not going to go through this, but this is a press release that I wanted to get you in writing when I send you this presentation. But there's a lot of good links in here to talk to you about the ballot initiative and where the $40 million comes from. It's essentially a 0.25% tax, a sales tax. So it has the broadest base of payments coming into it and has the least impact on the equity communities. So you can imagine a sales tax, all the tourist dollars get taxed, a lot of transportation things get taxed, a lot of things where it's not your average person paying that tax. And then because in Denver, groceries are exempt from taxes, people aren't being taxed on their food. So we're very careful about how we chose this tax, and the task force did a lot of deliberation before they chose this particular one. And that's why we believe it passed with a 64% approval rating. That just passed in November of 2020, and the dollars are just starting to come in really this month.
So Theron, to my knowledge, Denver is the only city in our state that has passed an actual sales tax or any sort of tax on its residents to fund climate resilience programs. Is that correct?
Actually, Boulder was the first one. They won
there you go.
back in 2006, back when that the state was doing the RPS, but it was minuscule. It's so small, it barely generates 2 million today. So it has a long ways to go. And we based some of our tax on how Boulder was doing it. That was our initial energy tax. So they're actually taxing energy and not sales. But Boulder could use another one that generates more dollars.
Thanks for that.
Yep. Along with that tax, we had to say, well, who's going to oversee this, or who determines how this gets spent? And so the city agreed to put this advisory council. So SAC stands for Sustainability Advisory Council. And these slides with this format, so you can see down the lower left, these are directly from the city and what they're presenting out there. But they essentially made a series of committees and 15 people that will be making recommendations on how the city spends the dollars. But any citizen can put in suggestions to these different committees. This is how it's broken down as far as the different categories. So there's a science and research team that's supposed to watch and make sure that we're meeting our goals. So there'll be an oversight committee, like take the 50% by 2030 reduction. they'll be watched on and make sure the projects that come through this group are meeting those goals. The Adaptation, Resilience, and Environmental Justice Committee was set up because we have required that 50% of the funding that comes in goes forward with an equity lens. So it goes towards groups who are normally harmed by environmental programs and have been overlooked in the past. So it's a good environmental justice program. So there's a whole committee set up with monitoring that. The Energy Committee is responsible for making sure those 100% renewable electricity goals are met. I'm also working with them to try to bring natural gas into this committee, but I'm up against some issues. I'm actually on that committee, but I'm not on the advisory council, which is the oversight of all this. Sustainable transportation, of course. Resource management is more of parks and materials. We're hoping they get into source 3 emissions, which are the emissions you take on when you buy something. It's a supply chain issue, and they're working with how they're going to do that. And then buildings and homes, which has been a very active committee because they were actually formed early on. And I'll show you some of the programs they're working on. So here's a bunch of the programs that are already in place that are well along, and you can read in these and learn more about them and adopt them. You know, I can set you up with people if you want to talk to any of the people who are running these to help your cities get an education. But there's a ton of programs that are based on climate, but they're across different segments like cannabis, neighborhoods, homes, and transportation. Then there's a solar option where the city has put emphasis on solar, and it's basically come down to 2 big things: solar co-ops and community solar. The Solar Sage program is where they recommend solar providers, but there's a whole web page out there on that. The next 2 in the center box, the 100% electricity program and the Energized Denver, are brand new, being released. Actually, the second one, the Energized Denver program, has 2 hearings this week on, I just took some notes for another meeting. On July 21st and July 28th, there's 2 meetings to discuss the final signing of that. But in that renewable heating and cooling plan, they're figuring out how to get natural gas out of homes and also to get cooling to the 30% of Denver homes that don't have air conditioning now. The net zero energy new buildings and homes is dealing with the electrical code. There's been a legislation passed to require all new buildings, all new residential buildings by 2024 had to be net zero energy, and 2027 for commercial. So there's a lot of fighting going on about that. They released it a little early and really got the developers up in arms. So that discussion is going on publicly now, which we want it to be, instead of behind the scenes. And then lastly, the Parks and Recreation Department actually got funding 2 years before Climate Action did. So back in 2018, a tax passed to give them $40 million. And they really have a good jump on doing some resiliency programs in parks and recreation. I'm not going into detail on this one. This is just kind of what Excel publishes and where they are with renewables. But if you look to the far right, you can see distributed solar, which is really the rooftop solar that would go on people's homes or on businesses, is only 1% of the Denver mix. I think that's a big surprise to most people that that's that low. The city wants to take that to 30% by 2030. So that's going to be a lot of effort to get them to go there.
And sorry to interrupt again, Theron, but I want to make sure the audience knows that we passed a bill in the legislature this last session to cap the fee on installation of rooftop solar at $500 if you're a single family resident and $1,000 if you're a multifamily or commercial or retail building. So now there's certainty in the price that it costs, because there used to be a whole bait and switch marketplace going on for how much would it end up costing you to put solar on your roof. And the legislature took care of that, and I am proud of them for doing that.
That was great.
Theron, do you mind restating that? Are you stating that only 1% of homes in Denver have solar?
It goes on the amount of electricity produced, that only 1% of our electricity comes from solar on homes.
Okay, thank you.
So these are the 6 areas that the tax can be used on, and we had to specify these when we wrote the bill. It's amazing the details you have to go into when you run a ballot campaign like this, and how much comes back on, basic citizens like ourselves that are trying to do the right thing, but you really have to learn a lot. I don't want to dissuade you from doing it, but really be prepared to learn a lot and to team with other people who know more than you do about these things. So we had to make sure, because it was a tax, that the voters knew exactly what we spent on. So these are the 6 categories we put together. Then I want to show you a couple programs that are more advanced. So with some of the funds, the city will be putting solar on top of city parking garages and parking lots. And they're trying to locate it closer to low-income housing or into what they call the, again, I'm not getting the name. It's called the NEST neighborhoods. I'm trying to think what the acronym stands for. But it's the areas who have the heat island effects or may have traditionally been ignored or have suffered from environmental injustice. So they will use some of the power from this to power city buildings, but they'll also allow the local residents to buy power from this at a greatly reduced rate, so that they benefit from this as well. And there's 9 of these. I think it went to 10 recently. They were allowed to do 1 more of these. But to do these, the city has to take this through Excel and the PUC in order to get them approved. So there's about a year delay on getting one of these out there. But because the task force last year was so adamant about doing this, the city went ahead and did it in parallel to the tax coming out. So a lot of the groundwork was done in advance. And then we put a lot of pressure on them to start to teaming up batteries with solar, because solar is worth a lot more with a battery there, because you can use it round the clock instead of just when it's sunny out. So there's a lot of programs going on around battery storage as well. So we'll wrap up here. Is our next step as Resilient Denver are to keep making sure the city meets this plan and really progresses according to the Climate Action Task Force recommendations, because we see over and over again the city reverting to the old plan and not taking on the bold actions needed to meet the task force recommendations. So we're having to constantly remind them we have an important goal coming up, and that's 40% carbon reduction by 2025. And we don't think they're going to hit it, but we're putting a lot of pressure on them to show us how they're going to hit it. The next one is, as I said earlier, this Excel 80% by 2030 doesn't jive with the city's 100% by 2025. So I'm sorry, 100% by 2030. So we're going to stay on top of that and figure out where we can make our move to push Excel to get there, or to push the city to take business away from Excel in order for them to make it. And then lastly, and this is where a lot of you on this group could come in handy too, is we want to team with other people out there to make sure that we have a big citizens group in order to put pressure on and make sure that the city is following the previous task force efforts. And it's amazing how much this city loses as new people come in and people go away. People forget about what they committed to and what's in previous plans. So we're constantly watching that And we're tapping into people who were on these task forces in the past that may not have been on the new task force, and making sure they're involved with us to help us, advise us, and keep us on top of the city. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about a few other groups that are going on right now. The bottom two are two new climate initiatives that are coming out. There's a group getting signatures right now for a Waste No More initiative to force businesses to do recycling in Denver because they currently get out of that. And then the last one, the People's Climate Campaign, that's another environmental tax on both electricity and natural gas use that another group that spun off from us is doing. And they still think we need more money than the $40 million. So they're trying to get signatures for that. I did hear, though, that I think they're pulling that but as we speak this week to not move that forward. And then above that is a link to the Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation, which Perry will present on next month.
Thank you so much, Theron. Before we move